What's happening, y'all? My name is Zendarius, and I'm back with more information regarding numbers in Warframe. This time, I'll explain about the damage types featured in this game. Because there are many of them and they affect enemies in different ways, I'll alleviate the confusion and explain what they are and how they work. Anyway, these types of damage are split into two different categories: physical and elemental. Each weapon in the game has a damage type or multiple damage types. With that comes different ways to deal with enemies. Some of them are weak to certain ones, some are resistant, and others are just outright immune to them. First up, I'm going to explain the physical damage types. The physical damage types affect the three primary health bars in the game. They are impact, which affects the shields or the blue bar, causes enemies to stagger more easily and increases the mercy kill threshold. The more stacks of this you apply, the easier it is to stagger them, and the sooner you can mercy kill them. There will be a yellow marker that will be visible to let you know about this. Best used against the Corpus in most cases, since they, outside of the Orokin enemies, they have shields. Heavy enemies are the only enemies you can mercy kill. But to kill heavy Corpus enemies, you need to deplete their shields first. Then you can mercy kill them. This procs 4% up to 80%. For clarification, mercy kills are an instant kill no matter how much the enemy health the enemy has left. So an enemy can have full health and you can mercy kill them and it'll instantly kill them. Next up, puncture damage, which affects the armor, which is the yellow bar, which is primarily against the Grineer. Deals increased damage to armored enemies. Also reduces the damage they deal to you with the proc weaken, and vice versa. The more stacks of this you give, the less damage you take. It procs every 5% up to 75%. Best used against the Grineer, but will work on all enemy types. Slash. It affects the red bar, which is the health. This deals true damage over time with the proc bleed. If done to Corpus, it will affect shields first, then damage their health. The more stacks of this you give, the more damage per tick you deal. It deals less damage to armored enemies like the Grineer, but still pretty useful. Generally, a weapon with a high stat in one of these would deal that type more often than others. Be sure to unequip all mods to check the base damage stats to better mod for its primary type. If the weapon has high slash damage, it will deal that damage type more often than impact or puncture if it has those damage types as well. This, however, don't mean you won't deal those other damage types at all. For example, if you primarily deal slash damage, it won't say that you won't deal impact or puncture at all. You'll just deal slash more with impact or punctures as a secondary. Alongside the physical damage types, there are elemental types as well. These types can affect certain enemies in ways physical damage don't and may lead to some of them being immune to it. Using those codex scanners to find what elements enemies are weak to will make dealing with them much easier when synergizing. There are 4 primary elemental types in this game, and they are divided up into 2 types: primary elementals, primary elemental damage, and secondary elemental damage. Primary types are the base elemental types since they are the singular in nature. In other words, they are only one single type. Because of this, they can fit into just about any weapon that exists, thus boosting a weapon's effectiveness. The primary elemental damage types are cold, deals the freeze proc. The more you stack this, the slower they move and fire. Procs at 5% slow up to 70%. This also reduces enemy damage output as a side effect. Goes great with puncture. Electricity. This procs the Tesla chain effect that causes enemies to be stunned and deals damage to nearby enemies in range. Deals additional damage to Grineer machinery and Corpus robotics. Works best on Corpus shields and large groups. Heat. Deals the proc immolation, which causes enemies to panic and strips their armor up to 50% and deals tick damage over time. When the effect ends, they regain armor every 1.5 seconds. Work great against Grineer armor and infested enemies. Deals huge damage when stacked with puncture, especially against Grineer enemies. Toxin. Deals poison damage over time. This proc bypasses shielded enemies and deals direct damage to health. Most effective against the Corpus. Nothing too special, but it helps tons in Steel Path when going against them, especially over shielded Corpus. A unique feature to those elements is that you can combine them to create secondary elements. One thing to keep in mind is the first two elements you have on a weapon will create a secondary element. If you equip a third one, it will have two, and so on. In other words, mod order does matter when doing this. Keep that in mind. There are a total of 6 secondary elements in this game. Though they take up more space on your builds, they have some of the most powerful effects around. Some enemies are immune to certain types, so get into the habit of using codex scanners to avoid this fate. The secondary elemental damage types are blast damage, which combines cold and heat damage. Reduces enemy accuracy. The higher this is, the less accurate enemy shots are. Affected enemies are inaccurate by 30% and procs every 5% up to 75%. Combine with puncture and standard maneuvers and you will barely get scratched. Corrosive. This combines both electricity and toxin damage. The status effect of this is called corrosion. This reduces enemy armor by 26% and procs reduce it further by 6% up to 80%. Combine with heat and you will kill grenadier armor with ease. Gas. This combines both heat damage and toxin damage. Creates a gas cloud that deals damage to enemies caught inside. The more stacks, the wider the radius. Starts off at 3 meters and increases by 0.3 meters up to 6 meters. Useful in large groups. Works best against infested since there is few damage types they are weak to. A good alternative to deal with the corpus as well. It even lingers after the enemy under its effects are killed. Magnetic. This combines cold damage and electricity. This damage type stops shield regeneration for a time. Also, it amplifies damage done to shields as well. If you are under its effect, it drains your energy by 50 per second. For enemies, this does 25% increased damage to shields up to 325%. Best against corpus overshields and liches or sisters, unless they are immune to the damage type. Radiation. This combines electricity damage and heat damage. Radiation initiates brainwash. Brainwashes the enemy under its effect and causes them to attack anyone close by. Also increases damage done to their allies by 100% and procs 50% damage each up to 550% damage. The funny thing about this is when you are under its effects, you can actually assassinate one of your enemies if you are close enough to them, which I've done quite a few times. Viral. This combines cold damage and toxin. This deals increased damage to an enemy's health bar. The more stacks you have of this, the more health damage you deal. Enemies are affected by 100% and procs 25% up to 325%. Great against grenadier grunts when you strip their armor, and corpus when their shields are down. Let me reiterate that mod order with elements effects do matter. From what I've seen, the maximum amount of elements you can have on a single weapon is 2. However, it may be possible to give it 3 through Kuva or Tenet weapons. They would need to have an innate damage type for this to work. The Tenet Archoplasma comes to mind since the primary damage it has is radiation, as well as magnetic from the progenitor frame on it. I know because I have this type of weapon. In closing, I used to think that it was a waste to add elements to my weapons since I wanted to deal raw damage and had little to no understanding how they work. But a little bit of research and a little bit of experimentation opened my eyes to what I was ignoring and made dealing with high level content way much better. So, take it from me that learning this early has been the most rewarding aspect it created my own playstyle, and I found some favorites to use against them. That's it for now. If you have any questions or looking for more clarification, don't hesitate to reach out to me as I make it a priority to help my fellow Tenno. Until then, I'll catch you guys later.